Chaim Kanievsky said about his father, that his father always wanted to write. We know that his father was one of the most prolific writers of his time, the Steipler, the Heilige Steipler. And the Chaim Kanievsky said that his father was one sefer that his father wanted to write, but Loistaya Milsa. And that was a sefer halacha on Börrer, because he felt that Börrer was something that the tzibur needs to just see cases and cases and cases, and can feed the amount of cases that they see, their life will be in Börrer, their mind will be in Börrer, and Memela, they won't chas v'chalila be over on Börrer. Börrer is unique, something that we don't find anywhere else. Kemat in Kol 1,705 Simanim of the Shulchan Aruch. Where do you find such a thing that Sif Aleph, when the Shulchan Aruch talks about Börrer, he writes Chayiv, Sif Beis, Chayiv, Sif Gimel, Chayiv, Sif Dalid, Chayiv. Every single case that the Shulchan Aruch talks about in Hilchos Börrer, if you do it like this, you Chayiv. If you do it like this, you Chayiv. If you do it like this, Chayiv. You don't find that. In Hilchos Bishul and Sif Aleph, it doesn't say, if you do this, you Chayiv, Gimel, Chayiv, Dalid, Chayiv. But yet, your Börrer is very unique, because in Börrer, everything is either Asa Deraisa or Mutter Gomer. It's very rare, very, very rare. In most of Hilchos Shabbos, you'll find that things are either Asa Deraisa, or some things are Asa Derabanan, or some things are Mutter. In Hilchos Börrer, every shaila that we're clearing and trying to figure out is either Asa Deraisa or Mutter Gomer. That has to give a certain level of severity and understanding the chshivas, the importance of that which we're learning in Hilchos Börrer. So that's Agdama Alaf, the Mishnah Berurah himself, in the beginning of the Sefer, Chelik Gimel of Mishnah Berurah, when he talks about what's the importance of learning Hilchos Shabbos, he says, of course, Börrer, one needs to learn Börrer, and the lashon of the Mishnah Berurah is so timeless. The Kain be'isa Börrer, when he wants to write about what's the reason why you have to learn Hilchos Shabbos, says the Chafetz Chaim, because Issa Börrer is matzi me'oid likashal. He says it's very, very common to be nichshol. Why? Not because of the pratim and of the complicated cases. He doesn't say that. He says because they just don't know Börrer. And that means that the Mishnah Berurah is telling us that if we start learning Börrer, so then that itself is going to be enough that we're not going to be nichshel in Börrer. Because Börrer is one of those malachas that berega you get the klalim, you get the rules, and then the applications are not so difficult. We're going to see today maybe some Geshmaka cases. The more cases, like the Steipler told us, that you have at your disposal, the more chances that you have of not being nichshel in the Yisr Börrer. And like I said, Börrer is either chayiv or mutter. So let's get right to the meat and potatoes, kipshutai. Let's get right to the cases over here and try to work out over here what exactly is the Tnai of La'alter. Now, as you know, every single shaila in Hilchos Börrer is based, I would say, on 4 parts. Part number 1 is, are we dealing with a mixture? I will not be talking about that today. The assumption of the cases that we're going to be talking about is that the cases are that the items are mixed. Börrer only starts when you're dealing with a mixture. So for example, if I have forks, knives, spoons inside a drawer, and each one of them is in their separate compartment, the forks are with the forks, the spoons are with the forks, the knives are with the knives, there's no shaila Börrer, because you're lacking in the aleph base, you're missing a taroivis. The assumption is that the cases that we'll talk about, if we talk about forks and knives and spoons, we'll be dealing with forks and knives and spoons that are reingemished, that they're all mixed together. That's what we'll be talking about. So that's number 1, a taroivis. It has to be a taroivis without a mixture. And that itself, Rabbi Yisai, you can give a full shiurim on what's called a mixture. And there's very, very difficult tazes and very, very difficult poskim to deal with the Ghedar of what's considered a mixture in halacha and what's not considered a mixture. For example, if you have big schnitzels and little schnitzels, even though there's a very big difference between a big schnitzel and a little schnitzel, but the Mishnah Berurah takes on that that's not called a taroivis. And it could be you'll be able to separate them because they're all schnitzel. Yet, we could have a whole shaila about tops and bottoms of the chicken. Is that considered a taroivis? Different types of cakes on a platter. And if you want to go and separate them afterward, that for sure could be a problem of Börrer. So that's problem number 1. That's issue number 1 whenever you're starting. That we will not talk about today. Then there's the 3 tnayim. Every single time we have a mixture and you want to come to separate the mixture, if you have all 3 tnayim, so then it's a mitzvah what you're doing. It's Einik Shabbos. If you're missing even one of the tnayim, so then you're doing an Isser and a Deraisa. That's the sheet of the Shulchan Aruch, even though these are machlekes Rishayim, but that's a sheet of all the Paiskim. So the Mela, you have to have 3 tnayim. What are the 3 tnayim? You have to be taking the item, you're undoing the mixture, you're breaking apart this mixture, the forks and knives, the spoons, they're all together. if you take it for immediate use, and that's what we'll be talking about today, la'alter, miyad, l'chaim, toivim, u'le'alter. What's called the altar? What's called that I'm using it for immediate use? That's the tnai number one. If you're taking the item from the mixture for immediate use, so then we're on the road to being mutter. That's number one. Number two is, and that we're going to talk about, what's called immediate, what's called miyad. Does it have to be mamish miyad? That's number one. Number two is that it has to be the good from the bad. The good from the bad, you can have two foods and you can have peas and carrots. So who's good and who's bad? You know, they say over a Maisa that when the Netziv got up that it was a big shaila between the Netziv and his mishpacha, the Beis Halevi, Mechutin. There's a big shaila about Volozhin Yeshiva, what to do in Volozhin Yeshiva, to close the yeshiva, to not close the yeshiva. Came the Din Torah to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. And Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan said that in the parsha we have always good guys and bad guys. In this week's parsha, you always have Yishmael with Yitzchak, you have Avram with Nimrod, you have always the Esav, Yankiv, you always have good guys, you have bad guys. He says when you get to the Shpetadik parshas in Bereishis, where you have the machlekes between the Achim, you have Yehuda and you have Yosef. There's no good guys, there's no bad guys. So when you have the Netziv and you have Naftali Tzvi Yehuda, you have Yehuda against the Beis Halevi, against Rabbi Yosef Doiv, Yosef and Yehuda, there's no good guys, there's no bad guys. So it's a very difficult shaila. So when you're dealing with peas and carrots, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy? When you're dealing with fat on meat, so then you have a good guy and the bad guy. If you take the good, you take the meat and you move your fork in this direction, you take the meat and you move the fork in that direction, that's doch Gan Eden, because you're doing a mitzvah vaynik Shabbos. If you take the bad, the fat from the meat away, you move the fat, the one in motion, so then that's the bad from the good, and that's an Issa Gomer. That's a Chayiv Chatis. That's an Issa Gomer. Derech Agav, they once asked the Ger Rebbe, you have a fly in the soup, how are you supposed to take the fly out of the soup? So he said, no. And what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do when David HaMelech davened of Avshalom? Avshalom gave him so much Agmas Nefesh, and he knew that he was going to be deep in Gehenim. But Fartazin, he was for his son. So it says in the Pasuk, Moirid Shoel Vayal. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? Avshalom was so deep in Gehenim. But he was all the way down there. How's David HaMelech with the Tefillah going to take Avshalom out of Gehenim? So David HaMelech davened. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He made Gehenim deeper and deeper and deeper. So what do? Yeah, but Gehenim is like this. Avshalom is over here. So you just keep making it deeper, 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 deeper. And there's Avshalom at the top now. So he said that's the same thing. You have a bug in the soup. Moirid shoyl vayal. I'll be moirid the shoyl, and then the mele, I'll take it out. You have the soup. So what do? You have a bug in the soup. So you take your spoon. You're going to go and take out the bug. That's bad from the good. So what do? You take your spoon, leave it there by the bug, and then be moirid. Take the soup and put it down, bring down the soup. So now you're taking the good, because the one in motion is the soup. You're taking the good and from the bad, and the bug bleibt ibib. The bug remains over there, and you take your soup like this. You go down. You have to always be taking the good from the bad. That's the second tnai. When you have peas and carrots, who's good? Who's the bad guys? Who's the good guys? They're both good. The one you want, that's the good. So you have to take the peas from the carrots. This, unfortunately, we won't talk about today. That's tnai number two. Tnai number three is you can't use a bora monster. You can't use a kli, which is miyuchad for bora. You could be doing it immediate and you'll be taking the good from the bad. That doesn't matter to us. If you're doing it with a kli, a miyuchad for bora, so then that's already a chshivastik bora, and that's usher no matter what. What is a kli, a miyuchad for bora is a big shaila about our peeler. There's a big shaila, obviously a sieve, obviously a sifter. The coffee, the French presses today, that certainly could be a problem of a boirer kli, and that we're not going to talk about. What we're going to talk about today is the tnai of la'alter, assuming that you have a taroivis, so that we're dealing with a boirer shaila, and assuming that you're taking the good from the bad, which is debatable when you're talking about fruits and peels, that's itself a shaila, and assuming you're not using a boirer kli. Now we want to know, I'm taking the good from the bad, I'm dealing with the taroivis, and I have over here not a boirer monster. I'm using my hand to take, I'm using a fork, which is a yad arichta. Okay, so now I want to know what's called la'alter. What's called la'alter when it comes to Hilchos boirer? So let's, Mitzvah Hashem, we have a lot what to talk about here, Rabbi Yisai. I think the ikar is to give the cases and the nafkaminas of the cases. But the ikar, you look in the Rishonim, and they have a big meduber over here, a big discussion over here. You saw the Talmidei Chachamim over here, saw the various marmikoimis of what's called la'alter. It's the idea that we seem to be going for in Hilchos boirer is that a boirer which is a storage, that's the cheshivistic borer. A borer which stores, that's a cheshivistic borer. That's the borer that the Torah says is considered an isser of storage. When you separate something, I have, for example, forks, knives, spoons, etc., and I'm taking out the forks and I'm going to go and put them in the drawer. And I'm doing it not for immediate use. Let's say you have a bunch of forks and knives and spoons and they're all mixed together and you're taking out the forks. Why do you want to take out the forks? To put them in their compartment in the kitchen, in the drawer in the kitchen. So then what you're doing is storage. We're trying to figure out today, Rabbi Isai, what is called la'alter. La'alter means usage. That's what we're going to see here in the Rishonim and the Poskim. When I'm using the item, I'm preparing it for usage. That's called la'alter. That's not a chashivas. But when I'm doing some form of storage, so then that's what's going to be a borer. What our job is to figure out what's called storage and what's not called storage. What's called that I separated it to store it, and that's a malacha. And what's called that I separated it to use. I might not use it this second, but it's clearly not storage. What's considered la'alter and what's considered storage? This I learned from the Chazon Ish, whose yard site was this week. But let's see, in Mitzad Rishonim, because of we're pressed for time, I'm not going to focus so much on the Rishonim. I'm going to focus more on the Poskim. Rabbeinu Chananel and Daf Ayin Daled and Beis, he basically lays down the cloud for us that you can have a 5-hour meal. You have in there a first course, a second course, a third course, a fourth course. Some of the Machmirim, they have even a 5th course. And you can have that, one meal. And in the beginning of the meal, 6 hours beforehand, you're separating. There's a lot of borer that goes on before a meal, Rabbi Isai. There's peeling, there's taking the forks and knives and spoons, which are all mixed together, and separating the forks and the spoons from the knives. There's a lot of borer that goes on before a meal. And sometimes I'm doing borer for the last course. I'm doing it for dessert. I'm doing it for the dessert, which is not going to be eaten for 5 hours from now. But that Rabbeinu Chananel, he tells us, well, whatever you're going to do for the whole Suda, that is already considered not a borer of a storage. I'm doing it for the upcoming meal. Rabbeinu Yeruchim, which I think the Olam also saw, he brings down, you know what? Maybe whatever I do for the upcoming meal, even if I'm 5 hours before the meal, maybe that's also okay. That's not called storage. Storage would be is if I'm holding before lunch and I do something for Shalosh Shodis, that could be storage. But if I'm doing something even 5 hours in advance and there's going to be a big hefsek in between, so maybe that's not called storage. And the Rabbeinu Yeruchim wants to be mad to that. We don't paskin like that. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman Shin Chaf Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah tells us that those people that they prepare the Shabbos meal 2 hours before Shabbos, before they leave shul bichlal, 3 hours before, he says, because when we require, and this is the Yisaida that we learned from our Rebbe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zeichel Tzadik Levracha. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Orach Chaim, Chelik Daled, Siman Daled, Borer, Oisid Gimel. He says that which you see in the Mordechai and that which you see in the Poskim, that they say all types of things. They say maybe you have the amount of time before a meal, a shah before the meal. You could prepare a shah before the meal. And other Lashonis, says our Rebbe Moshe Feinstein, and only Rebbe Moshe Feinstein can dezugen. He says that what you see there, the Kainu, the Shulchan Aruch HaGraz, and the Egli Atal, and all this. He says, Ein Shah Zu Shal Shir Shah. It's not, it's Lav Dafka. Ela Hazman Shaderech Hu Leisha Zu Shemisaderes HaOichlin Lasuda Vekoidim Lezeh Afilu Shaketana Osa. With this one sentence, our Rebbe Moshe Feinstein, Zeichet Tzadik Gadol, the great Goyin, the Melech of all of Klal Yisrael, set up for us all of the upcoming shilas and all the upcoming cases. Says the Goyin, what is considered the amount of time that is called storage, and what's considered the amount of time that's called usage? Whatever is the norm of setting up for that meal, that's considered usage. Whatever is not norm, whatever is extra and is not considered the amount of time needed for setting up that meal, then it's called you stored the item. Allow me to explain, Rabbi Isai, this Rav Moshe. Because, Rabbi Isai, what happens? A lady wakes up in the morning and she woke up early with the children. You know, it's very early in the morning. She woke up 6 o'clock in the morning and the lunch is not going to be till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. She says, look, I'm up now anyways. What I'll do is I'm going to set up for the whole entire meal now, and then I'll be able to go to sleep while my husband's in shul, and gewaldig, I'll wake up at 12 o'clock, I'll be a mensch or a fry or whatever she is. Right? So that Rabbi Isai is a gewaldig example of this. How long does it take her to set up the meal? It takes her an hour, let's say. Each person can feed their matziv. If you have a few children, takes this amount of time. You have more children, this amount of time. If you're setting up for a Shever Brachas, this amount of time. But let's say her, on a regular week, she's Meshayir, without nerving, it takes her about 45 minutes. Okay, so she knows she needs 45 minutes to set up. And Rabbi Isai, we don't mean 45 minutes worth of boirer. We mean the amount of time of setting up this meal in Gansen. Putting out the chairs, putting out the plates. The plates are separate in the closet. They're not a taroivis, but all that goes into setting up for the meal is considered now the chelik before the meal. That means anything I'm doing in this time period is not considered storage. Anything that I'm doing right now is considered that I'm setting up for the meal. So then that's considered not storage. But this lady, she woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and now she wants to work for 45 minutes. She's going to set up the chairs. She's going to do this. And she's also going to peel some things. She's going to be doing boirer. So that's a problem, because now by 7:30, she's done setting up the meal, and she's storing it for the next 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours. That's boirer deraisa. That's what the Rabbi Feinshin is coming to teach us over here. Whatever amount of time you need before the meal, that's the amount of time that you get. And again, not the amount of time that you need to do the boirer, but the amount of time that you need in order to set up a meal. So then the amount of time that you need to set up a meal, that's the amount of time that you get. Ad kidei kach, Rabbi Isai, I once asked does that mean that I have to do the boirer at the end? It takes me 45 minutes to set up the meal. Do I have to do in the last 15 minutes, the forks and knives and spoons are all mixed, and the peeling of the vegetables, that's where there's a boirer problem. Do I have to do that in the last 15 minutes? No. Rabbi Yasha said, Avadana. The lumdus over here is, are you storing? When I'm in the process of setting up the meal, I'm in the process of making the table roy for a Shabbos dish, etc. So then that's not called I stored. I didn't store, I'm in the shlava koidim. When you're in the shlava koidim, everything you're doing is considered for the meal. Everything you're doing is considered not being stored for the meal, it's setting up for the meal. But I'll give you an example. This will be shocking maybe to some of us. What happens? You want to set, a lady makes a cheshbon. This meal takes me about an hour to set up. Okay, so her husband's coming home from shul. He leaves shul, he finishes shul at 11:30. So she says, no, isha ksheda. What a good wife, right? So she says, look, you know what I'll do? I'm going to set up the meal from 10 till 11. From 11 till 11:30, I'm going to go and pick up my husband, right? 11 to 11:15, 11:15 to 11:30, I go home from the shul. So what did she just do? She set up, and she did boirer also, she had to peel things, and there was a mixture of the forks, the spoons, etc. So now what did she do? She took the meal, she took she took the forks, the spoons, and she stored them. They were stored for half an hour because there was an amount of time that they're not going into usage. That would be an Issa Gomer. That's what the Chafetz Chaim is saying. Now, I have a shaila myself. Maybe you guys will like my shaila. Me, I'm the Rav in the shul over here, and from my house to the shul is a 1 minute walk, about 59 second walk, barely 59 seconds. But for me, sometimes to get from the shul to my house could take sometimes about an hour and 59 seconds because people have shailas and people are, it takes time to say good Shabbos, it's as I get this, right? So what about my wife? My wife, time is that she has to come to shul to pick me up in order to start the meal. So she says, look, shul ends, let's say 11 o'clock. So I have to set up between 9:30 and 10:30, or let's say make it better, 9:45 and 10:45. She said, then I have to go to shul and get you in order to bring you home because the meal can't start without you. And it takes a long time for you to come home from shul. And if I don't go and get you, then the meal's not going to start. So I asked this shaila to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zayin Gesund, and Chaim Kanievsky, in addition to the fact that he smiled, which means that he liked the shaila, which I'm sure all of you do also. So the Chaim Kanievsky, he said that if be'emes, it's going to prolong the meal and there's people waiting and it's taka needed and you need her help in order to get you home. So it's ganzi tachin that can be considered a chelik of the preparation of the meal. So where do we place that? We won't say that she stored the food for those 15 minutes. We'll say that it's considered that that's a chelik of a preparation for the meal. I'll give you the gemayos of this, Rabbi Yisai. Let's say a lady, she sets up the meal. She sets the meal. No, and when she sets up the meal, so she doesn't want to wear her Shabbos clothing when she makes the whole setup of the meal and everything, because you get a little dirty and this, that. So what does she do? So from 9, she knows in her house, it's a half an hour preparation. Okay, so 10:30 to 11, she sets up. But the meal is not starting till 11:30. So why did she store the food from 9, I forgot her numbers, from 10 to 10:30 she sets up. But the meal's not starting until 11 o'clock. So why did she store the food from 10:30 until 11 o'clock? So I'll tell you why she stored it. Because she has to get dressed. It takes this lady a long time to get dressed. No, so it takes her half an hour. So that we could say, and this Shailai once asked Rav Elyashiv, and he said, that could be considered that from 10:30 to 11 o'clock, that's also a preparation for the meal, because everything that goes into the meal, she has to come in Shabbos clothing to the meal. That also goes into the preparation. Not only is setting up the table, but getting dressed for Shabbos. That also goes into it. That's all considered a chelik of the meal. So Vibal, that's considered a chelik of the meal. That's considered a chelik of the preparation. So therefore, that's not in the storage. We're no longer called storing. We're considered in the shlav of setting up the meal. So therefore, if the Yashiv held that that's going to be called mutter, that will be called la'alter. That's not called that she stored it. What other examples of this do we have, Rabbi Yisai? Lots of Geshmak examples. I once asked Rabbi Yashiv, what happens? A lady has to nurse. She has to nurse the baby. This is a very interesting shaila. I asked this shaila to Rabbi Yashiv. It caused a little bit of a family machlaikis over here. I asked this shaila to Rabbi Yashiv. A lady nurses before she wants to nurse before the meal. She wants to nurse before the meal. But the way it works is that it takes her, let's say she knows in her family, it takes her from 9:45 to 10:45 in order to prepare the Suda. Okay. But the Suda is not starting until 11 o'clock. But she B'dafka wants to do it from 9:45 to 10:45. Why? Because she wants to have from 10:45 until 11 o'clock to nurse the baby. Now, everybody's like, you don't have to be medactic in the seconds, in the minute. It means that the feel of what she's doing is she's not storing. So my numbers are just to give out the idea. But she knows it takes her an hour to prepare Be'erech. So she starts at 9:45 and she finishes at 10:45. Why she does that is from 10:45 till 11, she wants to nurse so that she can have the meal at 11 o'clock. So I asked this Shaila to Elyashiv, is that considered that she stored it? Maybe nursing is considered a separate thing. It's nothing to do with the meal, Bichlal. So maybe she set up, she stored the food, and then after she stored the food, she's going to eat the food. So there was a storage of 15 minutes. What did our Rebbe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, tell us? He said, and if you do it for any extra time, if you know that it's going to be stored explicitly for 15 minutes, you know for sure that's called storage. So our Rebbe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, taught us that that's considered oitzer, and that's a problem. So I asked this Shaila to Rav Elyashiv, and Rav Elyashiv said that he considers this to not be a storage. This is considered a chana for the meal. Why is it a chana for the meal? Because if you're not going to feed the baby before the meal, so it's going to be stirred. The whole entire meal is going to be stirred. The baby's going to be crying. It's going to ruin the meal. You need this for the meal. You need to feed the baby from 10:45 to 11. That's a part of the hachana. What's interesting is that when I asked the Shaila to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, he said, pum fakert punkt. What do I mean, pum fakert punkt? He said, I agree with halacha. He agrees that you're allowed to nurse the baby, but not because it's a chana, but that's the start of the meal. That's the start of the meal, because the baby is also considered. Your rabbi say, you have to feed your mule and your horse before you eat. The person has to feed, like the Gemara in Brachas. It tells us he has to feed his horse, he has to feed his animal before he eats. So then what? Kavachayim stellt sich vor, a baby is no different, says the Great Moshe Feinstein Taka. A baby is no different. So then the Mela, that's the start of the meal. He's also a part of the meal. It's just that he has to eat first. So therefore they came out with the same malacha, but it's a whole different lumdis. He's looking at it, Rebbe Yashiv, the Melech of all of Klal Yisrael. He's looking at it that this is a part of the Achane. So that's why it's not called storage. And Rav Chaim Kanievsky is saying, no, you finished the Hakana, and now you start the meal when you feed the baby. So that's why it's not called that you stored it. So interesting. I saw a similar idea by Rav Nissen Karelitz.
If you don't mind, what about women and girls setting up and then davening at home? Is their davening somehow considered to be a part of the Chana L'Suda? Because that's their technique. They're not going to eat before they daven. It happens in every Jewish home. Girls get a plate and they want to daven.
Wait, come again with the Shraila, because now I could hear you.
Shraila is women and girls davening. They set up the Suda because the men are coming home. They don't go to pick up their men, as the Rav explained. But it's a tekin, a part of their every Shabbos. They have to daven before they eat. The girls,
That's
get
a big
plate.
problem. That's a very big problem. You're going to say that you're not allowed to eat before you daven. So maybe we can consider it to be a part of the eating, but that's very schwer because it's not the pshat that davening is a matir. It's very wrong hashkafa. Davening is not a matir of the eating. The lumdus is that there's a side isser, but if you're going to daven in between, that's a very big problem.
Under being matir the achila, that's they feel that a chelik of Shabbos is davening, and this is the chelik of Shabbos morning. Can this somehow be made into Samach L'Suda? A lady doesn't want to daven first and prepare. She wants to prepare the Suda as the Rav explained, and that makes it chelik of Samach L'Suda, but she wants to daven a little bit in between. She's not going out. She's not leaving to shul. And this is any heter for that.
Let me go a little further, and it could be that maybe I might have an idea, might have a shtickle idea, but the way that I'm thinking now is that is exactly what she's doing. She's storing the food in the time frame of a different, once we can consider this a different event, so then we look at it as storing during that event, the event of davening. But let's see, it could be that from some other examples, it could be that we maybe might be able to get for example.
The other chaver might call her asking, can the lady go to daven and come right back up? I'm making it even easier by saying that she's davening at home. I'll read you the Shaila.
I don't like it. That itself would be, I would think that itself could be, that would be a problem. It's definitely a big Shaila, but it's, let me think about it. Let me think about it.
Sorry to ask, without interrupt. Okay, let's go back.
No interruption. It's a very big Shaila. But Nissen Karelitz has an interesting thing. I saw in the Sefer Al Meshulash a very interesting idea from Reb Nissen, which is the same type of a hashkafa over here. He says, if I set up the meal and then I say Shalom Aleichem, am I allowed to have the meal set before Shalom Aleichem? Or do I have to make sure that the meal is not set until Kiddush? So Reb Nissen Karelitz says, nah, Shalom Aleichem, listen to the lumdis. He says, Shalom Aleichem, singing Shalom Aleichem, that's a chelik of the hachana. Interesting to love this. I would have said that's the start of the meal. He says, no, that's considered a chelik of the hachana. That's why it's mutter, because you're still in the hachana process. So therefore, it's not called storage. But he says, but let's say someone has a hanhaga, that his minig is before every time he eats, he learns some Gemara, he learns a Mishnah, he says some Tilim or whatever. So he says, then when he sets up the food, the meal, all the various all the various boilers and everything that he does, the reason why it's not called storage while he learns that Mishnah, while he learns that Parak, while he learns that, is because that's called the start of the meal. At start of the meal, he's starting with Torah. Shalom Aleichem is inviting the Melacha, and that's a part of the Achana process. Again, the Iker is the Geshmak in the Lumdis, is the Geshmak for the Lumdis. For example, I give you good examples, Rabbi Saif, where people just don't you have to don the difficult cases. A person goes to shul on Shabbos. In a case, he has an Erev. In Eretz Yisrael, there's a lot of places where they move in and does. No. He goes to shul on Shabbos. He likes taking with him his siddur, his chumash, or a person goes to learn. or he's in his own house and he's learning, but he has a place where he learns, and his svarim are in a different room, right? So he has the svarim, and he's going into this, his learning room, his place where he learns. So he wants to take. He's taking a Gemara, he's taking a Rashba, he's taking a וגדר. Now he knows that he has a schedule. His schedule is first he's going to learn the Gemara. Then afterward, he's going to go into the Rishonim. That means he's not learning וגדר and the Rashba for another half an hour, 45 minutes, right? So that Mistama will look at as one big Suda. And taking everything now is considered one big Suda, so that I'm doing the preparation beforehand for that one big Suda. That's the case I think you'll all agree to. But what about going to shul? When I take with me my sitter to go to shul, what am I doing? My sitter I'm going to use right away. But my chumash, I'm not going to go and use my chumash until laning. What's laning? Is laning a separate entity from davening? Is laning and davening a separate entity? Is laning its own chefta? And therefore, maybe I'm storing the chumash, assuming that the chumash was a bורר. That's a whole different parsha. If svarim on a shelf are called bורר, but let's say you have the chumash and it was in a pile and whatever. So you took out your specific chumash. So what am I taking the chumash for? I'm taking it for an hour and 15 minutes from now. That means you're storing it. You took it out of its taroivis, and now it's stored for the next hour. Or do I say, no, davening is all one big package deal, including the laning? It's interesting. I asked a different child, Chaim Kanievsky, and from there you can get an answer. It says in the Mishnah Berurah that when you wear your talis for davening, you have to wear your talis on your head from the beginning of tefillah till the end. Now, if I say it doesn't mean from the beginning of Shmoneh Esrei till the end of Shmoneh Esrei. You don't talk like that. You would just say you have to wear your talis on your head during Shmoneh Esrei. But the Mishnah Berurah says you have to wear your talis from the beginning of davening till the end of davening. That means from Moedani until Shir Shal Yoyim Gevemach until whatever, Kaveh. So I want to ask Rav Chaim Kanievsky, it sounds like from the Mishnah Berurah, even during laning, which is not the minig. During laning, nobody wears the talis on the head. So I asked him, is laning also included in this? Now, I'm telling you, Mirosh, that I realize this is not the minig, but Rav Chaim Kanievsky said that, yeah, Mishnah Berurah says from the beginning of davening till the end, including the laning, because that's a part of the davening. So mitzad that, yesh ladim. But al kapanim, when it comes to looking at davening as a package deal with the laning, so then it's considered a package deal. According to Chaim Kanievsky, so I guess it'll tell you like this. If you wear your talis over your head during laning, so then you can bring your chumash for the hour and 15 minutes later. Mashain Kain, if you don't wear your talis on your head, then you consider laning to be its own separate entity. And I don't know if that's true, but it definitely brings out the point. How many cases, Rabbi Isai? Playing cleanup. What do you tell the kids? Now I'm talking where there's a taroivis. Sometimes Shabbos afternoon, there's a taroivis of toys all mixed together. And I don't mean that there's one big toy and you see it distinctly and clear. Lots of little toys, a lot of games got mixed together, puzzles and checkers and this and that. And yadaina medan spiel. No, so Maisa, what do you say, Rabbi Isai? You tell the kids, let's play cleanup. What does it mean to tell the kids, let's play cleanup? It means put these toys over there, separate these there, these there. You know what playing cleanup is? It's called playing bורר. What are you teaching a child? You're teaching a child that this is how we store things. That's an Isser Gomer. You're teaching a child to take this, not for usage, you're putting it in its place. That's called storage. That's bורר deraisa. That's a very big michshel. I'll give you another example. This is something you get done. Let's say you like setting the table on Friday night for Shabbos day. Why do you like setting the table? Now, again, I'm assuming that there's bורר. Why would there be bורer? Because all the silverware and cutlery, it's all mixed together. Now, I'm going to give you an eitzah, Rabbi Isai, which you should remember for the rest of your life, and you can get out of the issue. The eitzah is that Friday night, you have forks, you have knives, you have spoons, they're all mixed together and they're all inside the sink. And you want to wash them for the next day. Now, you could teach a child that when he cleans up the table, you tell a child, you take off the forks, you take off the knives, you take off the spoons. Nothing wrong with that. They're all kept separate. They were never in a taroivis, and it's great. Okay, but that didn't happen. And one kid just takes all the cutlery and throws them in the sink. Now, if you were to take out and you would say, okay, now I'm going to wash the fork, and you take out the fork and you wash the fork, that's an Isser Gomer, because you're doing bורer and it's not for immediate use. You're separating, you're going after the fork. I want the fork, I washed the fork, and now I'm going to put away the fork. So then you did bורer because you are specifically Separating, not for immediate use. Washing an item is not a use of an item. That's not a use of an item. That's making it usable, but that's not a use of an item. However, there's an eitzah. The eitzah is that if you have the forks and the knives and spoons, and you just indiscriminately, says the Taz, take out any of them. You don't care what you're taking out, right? So now if you just take out any of that, now don't get me wrong, Rabbi Isaac. If you have forks and knives and spoons which are clean, and you say, oh, I don't care, and I just take out any of them. I take out a fork and now I put the fork in its place. So then avada, that's one big ma'aseh b'orer. But let's say I have them all mixed together. And I take out any one, not a specific one, and I take it out to wash. Avada, it's a normal thing to wash things one by one. And you didn't do a ma'aseh b'orer because you didn't try to get the fork. So I took out anything to wash, which is normal. Now it's in my hand. I'm not mechuyev to now go and put it back into the mixture. So that's a very good eitzah to keep in mind. For example, let's say you're makpid on spots on the silverware. Some people aren't, and this only works if you are. So now it's a normal thing. You have all the forks, knives, spoons, they're all washed, and they're all mixed together. So now it's a normal thing. You want to dry it because you don't want it to get water spots. So if you take out dafka fork, because you want to take first the fork, that's a problem, because you chose specifically the fork. But if you just take out any of them, and now it's in your hand, you don't have to put it back. It's a normal thing to dry it. If you're drying it just for the purpose of putting it in the drawer, so that's b'orer. That's b'orer. That's for storage. So now that was an aside. That was parenthetical. Now come back. So now you have your forks, you have the knives, you have the spoons, and they're all mixed together. They're all washed, and they're all sitting there in the drying rack. But you like to have the table set on Friday night for Shabbos day. So says the Goyim Shleim Zalman, it depends. There's different people why they like it. Some people like the tzura, the ambiance of a Shabbos table. They want it set. Those people that set the table from 12 o'clock on Friday afternoon also. They're not doing it because they want to have off in the morning. They're doing it because they like the tzura. So it's like they made artwork. That's a usage. The usage of the fork, the usage of the cutlery, the usage of the plates and everything. Obviously, I'm only talking when you did b'orer, but the usage is not just when I'm going to eat from it. The usage is the tzura of a Shabbos table. But you have to be extremely honest, Rabbi Isaac, because I know people that made a mistake. And they always thought, there's a heter from Rosh Hashanah, the Shmir Shabbos brings down that, the Shulchan Shleima brings down that if you're setting up because you like the look, but Rabbi Isaac, if you're setting up because you want to be able to sleep late, so then that's called that you set it up for storage. Then avada, that's a problem. That's avada going to be a problem. If you had forks and knives, the plates you could put there, because usually the plates weren't b'orer. But if you had forks and knives and spoons, which are all mixed together, then you have a problem. You're taking the fork, you're putting it there, the spoon, you're putting it there, and you're doing it as a storage. You're not doing it for the usage of right now. Another example.
What does Rav Shlomo Zalman mean? What does Rav Shlomo Zalman mean?
Rav Shlomo Zalman meant that you're the type of person that 12 o'clock Friday afternoon, you set the table because you like the tzura of Shabbos to have a Shabbos table. You like that, that's an artwork. You want to see forks and a plate, a setting. You want to see the 6 settings, the 10 settings. It makes you feel Shabbos. It's a tzura of the house. So then that's called the usage. One of the usages of the fork and the knife and the spoon is not just to eat with. The usage by you is it looks like a Shabbos table.
In America, it's called presentation. That's
presentation. What does it?
So why can't you do presentation in the morning?
You have to be honest about it, right? Each person has to go into the depths of his heart and say, what's the real reason why I'm doing it? If the real reason you're doing it is that you don't have to do it in the morning, so then that's considered a storage. I'll give you an example. Some people, what they do is they have a living room and there's a closed door, a dining room, and they have a closed door in that dining room. And they set up that table and then no one goes into that room for the next 12 hours. It's hard to believe that that's a presentation of Shabbos. He's doing it, he doesn't let anybody look at it. He doesn't look at it. He opens up the door, voila, time to eat. So then it's clearly being done for the storage of just for the meal when we're gonna eat. So for 12 hours, it was stored. Now, Mashain came, if somebody just like, they love the tzura, there's an artwork to it. So then that's a usage. There's a certain usage of that. And if he's doing it to make his wife happy, you can't do b'orer to make your wife happy. You have to do other things to make your wife happy. The Netziv, Rabbi Yisai, you know what the Netziv did to make his wife happy? The Netziv was married to the Aruch HaShulchan's daughter. That was also his niece. They say the Torah to me was the Shadchan. But the Netziv, he ate a food that his wife, his niece, cooked for 35 years. And he never liked it just to make her happy. That's what you do to make your wife happy. You eat her food even if it's dreadful. But you never do borough for your wife. Another case will be like this, Rabbi Isai. What happens if a neighbor knocks on the door? And my examples are always forks and knives and spoons, but you realize there's billions and trillions of examples, each person on his own. You know, so a neighbor knocks on the door. I'll give you a great example. This happened to me last Friday night. Actually 2 Friday nights ago. A neighbor knocked on the door and asked us, do we have an extra challah? They knocked Friday night. They asked us, it was after the meal, and they asked us for Shabbos day if we have an extra challah. So my wife went to the freezer, and we have challahs. Now, not everybody's freezer is a taroivis and bororer. My freezer is a total taroivis. There's millions of things inside there, wrapped in silver foil and this, and you can barely make it, you can't find your way in there and whatever. A Yiddish freezer. So the neighbor asked for a challah. So my wife asked, am I allowed to give the neighbor the challah? Because I'm taking the good from the bad. The challah is the one you want. And I'm obviously not using a kli. And it is clearly a taroivis. Is this called immediate use? That's interesting to Shaila. That's interesting to Shaila. She must be the wife of a Talmud Chacham. It's interesting to Shaila. A challah, which he's not using for the next 12 hours. So what's the Shaila? Of course it's bororer. Of course it's bororer, and of course it's not la'alter. No, but what's my wife's use in the challah? My wife's use in the challah is doing a ma'aseh chesed. So how do we look at this? Do we look at this that it's klape, the person that's going to be the final usage, or is the giving of a challah, is that itself also a usage? Is that a usage itself to give this? To this a very interesting shaila. I found the Shmir Shabbos Hilchos in Perek Gimel, HaRav Shamati me goyner shleimus almen orbach. Mistaber shaboyer kli kidei lashilo lechavera, to give a kli to your friend, even if Yenim's only going to use it later on. That's called la'alter, because the brer of that kli is a gmar usage. Moyer dike de vel goyna gadol Reb shleimus almen orbach. That's called the usage. I'll give you another example, Rabbi Yisai. A few weeks ago, a knife fell into the garbage. But it's a common case because you're scraping off the food. And so when you scrape, sometimes you scrape too far and the knife falls into the garbage. No, knife in the garbage, that's a pretty big taroivis, right? You have over here all the garbage and there's the knife. And I know the knife is sitting at the top and I know that you see it and whatever, but I'm still very nervous if that's called the taroivis. If the knife got in there a little bit, I'm very nervous that that's called the taroivis. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to take out the knife, the good from the bad, and I'm not using a kli. Hey, wait a minute. Why are you taking out the knife from the garbage? You're not using the knife right away. That's clearly not going to be used until the next time. LMI, I'm going to go and wash the knife. That's not a usage. That's making the kli usable. So wait a minute. So if I take that knife out of the garbage, givalt, chayiv chatis. So what's the eitzah? So the eitzah is like this. I'll take the knife out. I'll go and wash it, obviously, because you don't have to use the dirty knife. And now I'll go and find the usage for the knife. So I told my son, take the knife out of the garbage and go and smear some peanut butter on the bread. So my son said to me, and he said, no, das is hachana. Who's having peanut butter sandwich on Shabbos? I told him, okay, I hear. So it's fine. We'll have the peanut butter sandwich for Shalosh Shudas. So he says to me, Ta, you're taking out a knife and you're making a peanut butter sandwich for Shalosh Shudas. So wait a minute, this happened on Friday night. That's not for the upcoming meal. That's for 12 hours, for 20 hours from now. I told him that's a mistake. He didn't get dessert. He's in big trouble with me. By us, if you make a mistake in bororer, you don't make in the lumdis, you don't get dessert. I told him, no. The usage of the knife is not eating the peanut butter sandwich. The usage of the knife is smearing the peanut butter. Once I did it, I used the knife. So I'm taking out the knife from the garbage, which of course you could wash. You don't have to use it dirty. And then I'm using it to smear the peanut butter. I don't have to look at if he's eating the peanut butter sandwich immediately. And I'm being asked over here, why isn't that aroma? It is aroma, but it's aroma that works. Moyerdik. That's a gewaldig. Because in Börrer, what's kaveya is, am I storing it? Over here, I'm not storing it. I'm using it. Using it. Mutter. Let me get weiter. Kommt again the Ben Ish Chai. And the Ben Ish Chai says, let's say I'm making a lot. I make egg salad. Okay? When I make egg salad, I have to shell the eggs. So that's a Börrer. But I'm doing it for the upcoming meal. It's within the hour, the 20 minutes, the half hour, the 2 hours, whatever amount of time you get, it's within that time frame for the upcoming meal. For the Maisa, I'm having guests. And, it's true that there's no way they're eating more than 4 eggs worth, but I don't want to, I have a nice bowl over here, and it would fill it to the top. It would look so much nicer if I could put in there like 6 eggs. I could shell 6 eggs and it would fit in there much nicer, even though they're vada not going to use it. No, so this already, Rabbi Goddess Middle tell us, but that's called presentation. And presentation is also a usage. And you're a makavin to the Ben Ish Chai, because the Ben Ish Chai says like that. Don't make a mistake, Rabbi Yisai. Don't make the mistake that a lot of people make. They say, look, I'm making 3 eggs for lunch. I'm making 3 eggs for Shalashidis. So why do I have to get my finger dirty twice? I'll take all 6 eggs and I'll make them now. That's Börrer deraisa, because there you're not doing it for presentation. You're doing 3 eggs for now, and you're doing 3 eggs for später. And that's leheja, even though this egg and that egg I might eat, that's a vada Börrer deraisa, because 3 of the eggs is being used immediately for the upcoming meal. And the other 3 eggs, mefoirash, you're not going to use for this meal. You're not doing it for presentation. Hashem knows the emes. You're doing it for shalshudas. I'll tell you another case that people make a mistake, because same idea. You take a cantaloupe. When I was in the old country in America, they used to have, I think it was the honeydew. No, maybe it was the cantaloupe also. And inside you have all those little seedlach. You know what I'm talking about, Rabbi Yisai. Inside the cantaloupe, inside the honeydew, they have all those seeds. Okay, so let's say it's just you and your wife. All right. So you cut her down the middle. Now you open it up like this. What does everybody do? You scoop out the seeds from this side and you scoop out the seeds from this side. Whoa. Scooping out seeds. What's this all about? Scooping out seeds. You're not allowed to scoop out seeds. How do you go and scoop out these seeds? What's going on over here? How are you allowed to scoop out these seeds? So the answer is, it's bad from the good. So that mitzad Hilchos Börrer, you're going to learn about in Mitzvah Hashem, and you're going to see that for whatever reason, there's sometimes that we let you take out the bad from the good. I'm not going into that, but I'm interested in a different parsha. What about la'alter? Are you doing it for immediate use? So if you're eating the whole honeydew, gewaldig. If you're eating both sides of the honeydew, gewaldig. So you take out the seeds, you take out from this side, that side, and you're going to cut up 6 slices and everyone's going to eat it now, gewaldig. That's not a problem. The problem is, let's say it's just you and your wife. So now you're not eating the whole entire honeydew. So what do people do? They cut the honeydew in half, the cantaloupe, whatever she is. They take out the seeds from this side and they take out the seeds from that side. Wait a minute. Why are you taking out the seeds from that one over there? You're not eating that one until tomorrow, until Shalashudis. You just did Börrer and it's not for immediate use. You did Börrer for Shalashudis. That's a major problem. It's a gomer. It's a deraisa. Now, I must tell you other cases, Rabbi Yisai, which are difficult cases. I'll give you an example. The wife goes to sleep that night, Friday night, and she says, you know what, in the morning, the kids, in Machem Meshiga, they want to get dressed in the morning. I'm still sleeping. Right? So she goes and she wants to take the child's clothing and set up the child's clothing so that when the kid wakes up in the morning, they'll just get dressed and they'll let her shlof and the Oynik Shabbos, Habenim Abbas, Hashem Shabbos, Sheina Mishu Bachas. So now, not always is it Börrer. If you have kids' clothing and they're separate, okay. But let's say you have all of the dresses and they're all psarayin gemished and they're all packed together. And then you have all the different tights and they're all, the little girls' tights, they're all in a drawer, and they're all 50 different colors and green and purple and polka dots, and they're all together. I say, right? So she takes out the dress that she wants, which is the good from the bad, and she takes out the tights, the green one, which is the good from the bad, and she takes out this color shirt, and they're all mixed, assuming it's a taroivis. That part I'm not going into. But what is she doing, Rabbi Yisai? She's doing a storage for the morning. So you're going to say, oh, but come on, but what could she do? She has to do it now because she's not going to be able to do it in the morning, or she's going to have to wake up. I feel bad for her. I'll take out my violin, Rabbi Yisai. So you know what? You'll wake up because there's no eitzah for that. You're not allowed. That's called storage. That's what she's doing. That's the definition of bורer. That's storage. She's taking out the good from the bad for 12 hours from now. That's not doime to a case of where I want to defrost the challah. So I take out a challah from the freezer, and it takes 2 hours to defrost. It only takes me an hour to set up the meal. I'm taking out the good from the bad. The Torah says, yes, you're taking out the good from the bad. It's 2 hours and the meal only takes me an hour to get, yes, but this challah takes 2 hours because she has to defrost. So that would be allowed. Don't get confused though, everybody say. What happens if Friday night, you say, I want to put the Coke in the fridge, or the Ber Mayim Chayim. I want to put it in the fridge. Why do you want to put it in the fridge? So that should be nice and cold. If I'm going to only do it in the morning before I go to shul, it won't be freezing, and it's got to be freezing, or it's not any Shabbos, right? So what do? I'll do it the night before. Now I'm assuming the bottles are mixed, and there's a mixture of bottles and taroivis. So I'll do it the night before, because if I do it first thing in the morning, it won't be freezing cold. So I got to do it the night before. This is a problem. This is a big problem, because you don't really need to do it 13 hours before. You need to do it 5 hours before. But in the morning, it's only 2 hours. So that's why you're doing it 13 hours before, which means it doesn't take 13 hours to get this drink cold. So then that's called that you stored it. I realize you have a problem. I sympathize. I sympathize with you. But I don't think that should warrant, unless it's a pikuach nefesh, I don't think that would warrant doing bórer on Shabbos. Which brings us to a very interesting shaila, Rabbi Yisai. You send your children to the park, and you want to send them with healthy foods. You don't want them eating all this junk. So you want to send them with cucumbers and whatever. So Mitzvah Hashem, you'll learn from the other great rebbeim if you're allowed to use a peeler or if you have to use a knife to peel. But let's say there definitely are poskim that are mattering on the peelers and throw a knife. So you want them to use, you want to go and peel the cucumber. Okay. Or you want to peel a carrot. Now, this whole shailas, if that's called the taroivis or not, but let's say your child is a mefunik and they b'shum panim won't eat the peel of the cucumber and you have to peel it. So therefore, let's say it's considered a taroivis. And let's say I tell you you're allowed to take the bad from the good in this case for whatever reason. Is that called immediate? In other words, the kids just ate lunch. Now they're going to the park. So now you peeled the cucumbers for what? You tell the babysitter in an hour from now when they need a snack, you give them cucumbers. And you're peeling it now for when? For an hour from now, right? Or let's say you're taking the kids to the park and you know you're not giving them the cucumbers until an hour goes by in the park. So why are you doing it now? Because you don't want to bring a peeler to the park. But that's called that you stored it. That could be a problem. I tell my wife, if she does this, I tell her, you make sure that there's always a potential that you might use the cucumbers immediately. And you might immediately, like on the way out, tell the kids you want a snack now and whatever. You're allowed to do bórer for a potential, Rabbi Yisai, unless it's fake. I'll give you an example. My wife, until she chapped that it takes me an hour to come home from shul, so she used to set up the table. By 11 o'clock, the table was set. Everything was set. No, I show up into the house sometimes 11:30, 11:45. So she tells me, you're making me be over on bórer. That's her way of getting me home. Verstehst? She tells you, you're making me be over on bórer because I'm setting it up at 11 o'clock and you're coming home at 11:30 because the shul ends at 10:45. I thought you'd be home by 11 o'clock. It does. So Mamela, you're making me be over on bórer. I told her, no. There's a potential that I'll be home at 11, right? So you have a right, when she's doing the Maisa of the bórer, she's doing the Achana, she's setting it up for the situation of the earliest possible time. That means she's not storing it. She's saying, I'm setting it up for the time at 11 o'clock that the meal should start. If it happens to be that I don't come back, she wasn't doing it with the intention of storage. It got stored. You know what it's like, Rabbi Isai? It's like a person that goes and makes 3 eggs for the egg salad, and you only wind up eating 1. You're going to say that those 2 eggs, she has the right to set up for any amount of potential that people might eat. Don't make a mistake, because there's a Mishnah Berurah that talks about something else, which is totally different. He talks about a case in the beginning of a person that went and shelled the eggs and did all the boirers and everything. And then he changed his mind and decided not to eat. In that case, the Mishnah Berurah says an interesting lashon. The Pri Megadim brings a Beis Yosef that might be a chayiv chatas because you wound up doing boirer for no good reason. So it's all storage. Mishnah Berurah says it's not the right thing to do. Like Ovid, like arich lemevid achi. It's not the right thing. Is that the same case? Totally different. Over there, when I change my mind and I decide I'm not going to eat those eggs, so then it comes out that the whole entire boirer was for nothing. Here, the mice of the boirer and the storage, and you didn't store anything. And you did the right thing. You set up the food to be able to be eaten at that time. You set up the table, the everything to be eaten at that time. You did the right thing. You did everything correctly, right? It's just that I wound up not eating it yet. Right? So you did what was right. That's not called that there was a change of mind. When there's a change of mind, then that's worse. A change of mind, that might be worse. But over here, that's considered to be a davar amuter, and that would be the Seder Gomer, Rabbi Isai. I see that we're out of time, unfortunately. I hope and pray that with just the mere learning of the sugya of Bairer, that's exactly what the Chavetz Chaim was saying. He said, when you're in it, when you're in the inyanim, so then you won't be nichshel in Bairer, because you realize all the cases and yichapsach, and you see the demises of Beisai, chutz from the halacha lemaisa, but the geschmack of the limud that the Rebbeinu Shalom, we have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for the Aguda, because they give us that geschmack, the geschmack of sugis, the geschmack of topics, and Baruch Hashem, that we're zoichet to come together and learn the Torah together, Bez Hashem. This should be a great schus for Klal Yisrael. Specifically today, this should be a great schus, and we know what we need that schus for today, Rabbi Isai. Halavai lavi a schus for that which we all want, Bez Hashem.